We'll do it live.
Hello and welcome to Under the Sticks, a podcast brought to you by Big Red Cloud. My name is Andy McGeady. Visit www.bigredcloud.com for all your online accounting needs. Joining me today, I have Mr. Sean Holley. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Ant. Yeah, enjoying myself. This lockdown stuff, I'm getting used to it, actually. King of the house, you know. Got all the family here and the dog, and I'm ruling the roost. It's like being back in coaching, enjoying.
Lockdown, an introvert's dream. Mr. Redmond, the man pulling the levers. How are you?
I'm not too bad, although our 2-year-old has tested us today entirely. I blame it on his mother, who banged his head very early this morning by accident, and he spent the rest of the day getting payback.
Oh, I can sympathise. I had a face plant with an almost 2-year-old on a scooter, blood everywhere. I was a traumatised dad over the weekend. But he's all right. He's all right. The man.
You know, if he's not old enough to call the authorities.
No, not just yet. We also welcome special guest Ross Harries from Premier Sport, or Radon Soul Tip. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to be here. I'm hiding my attic, as you may be able to figure out, because I have 2 young children who've been running me ragged all week. Well, for the last, 2 years, it seems. So this is my sanctuary. The door is locked, and hopefully I'll just be sitting here weeping after we finish the broadcast.
Oh, they're way more clever than that. A locked door to nah. Later on, we'll be talking some rugby stats. We'll have Sam Larner, journalist and analyst, in to help us with that. We'll run through some news first, though. But we'll talk. How are we, Sean Holley? Have you been exercising as usual? Yeah,
I have actually. I've been. As you well know, I'm 50 this year in November, so I'm about to launch a Fit for 50 campaign, and I've been doing like a 10-day trial training and diet and ketosis thing. And do you know what? I've dropped 4 kilos in 10 days. So I've worked hard, and I've counted my calories, and I've exercised a lot, but it seems to be working. So apart from that, it's been a pretty normal box set watching rugby sort of week.
How's lockdown treating you, Ross?
I'm not doing as much fitness as Sean. I got my 5-year-old into Joe Wicks for about 3 days at the beginning of lockdown, after which he abandoned it, discovered something called cosmic yoga on YouTube instead, which tickles her fancy more. But I have persevered with Joe Wicks, but that is my sole concession to fitness. But I got to be honest, right? I've been wondering whether to just abandon my gym membership altogether, because half an hour of Wicks in the morning kind of sets you up for the day, and I don't have to pay my ongoing gym membership. So yeah, a bit of that. My everything has become kind of granular now. I just focus on the tiny things, the small wins. I've developed an addiction to double deckers over the course of the lockdown, and the highlight of my day every day is post-lunch when the 1-year-old goes for a nap, and I make a cup of tea and eat a double-decker in the garden. That is the highlight of my day.
It's the little things. I've done cosmic yoga with one of the little lads. It's all right.
You know.
Yeah, I was doing a bit of stretching. I'm getting old. It was actually surprisingly hard.
Very hard. See, she abandoned Joe Wicks. I abandoned that after a couple of attempts, because I realised my hamstrings don't allow me to lift my legs more than about 2 inches off the ground, and I've never been able to touch my toes, but I can barely touch my knees now. So I leave that to her, and I kid myself that I'm working hard during Joe Wicks, but I'm not happy with this ladder thing he's bringing in, where you have to do 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off. Come on, Joe. Is that pretend we're going nuts?
Is that ladder like early 90s WWF sort of cage match top rope ladder, or is it?
It's a metaphorical ladder.
Ah, okay.
Which gets harder to climb the longer the workout goes on. I've got virtually no WWE references to call upon. I'm afraid my my only wrestling references are Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks in the old ITV days, which I don't know if that ever made it across the Irish Sea, but it was a big deal.
I tell you what,
in this
boys,
it was after the Fall Guy.
What this lockdown has shown, like Ross is saying now, you know, he's got a gym membership. I like to go to the gym. People either do or they don't, and sometimes it's an excuse, isn't it? Oh, I'm not paying that gym membership. It's too expensive, or I haven't got time to go to the gym because I'm working and I can't get there. I got to do this. What this lockdown has shown, and online with people like Joe Wicks and so many others, is you can do so much at home. There's no excuse anymore for those people, is there? You can work out.
No, this is it. I'm doing sort of a 5K every evening, which isn't a lot, but for someone who wasn't doing any exercise, I'm very happy with that. It's better than not doing my 5K, and I'm happy. Yeah,
and then so you should be. I walk the dog every morning, and it's anywhere from 6K to 8K brisk walk. And as Ross said, that sets you up for the day. You know, you've done your 10,000 steps, which is really more than what average people do. And if I can get a gym session in as well, then, you know, I can eat a little bit more that I want to eat, but I don't eat double deckers.
No, not all.
They're smaller than they used to be, though. So that's how I justify it to myself. They're about half the size of an 80s double decker.
Yeah.
So, one question I have just on snack food getting smaller. Did our fingers get bigger or did hula hoops get smaller? That's what I want to know.
Everything's smaller, isn't it?
As a kid,
remember
I was
as
like
a kid.
a guy out of the Avengers, you know.
Yeah. I remember going down to the local shopping centre, and there was one guy who was an Italian who had a little sweet chocolate shop, and he froze Mars bars. So a frozen Mars bar obviously lasts a little bit longer, and I love frozen chocolate. But I look at a Mars bar now, and you think, it is half the Mars bar, isn't it, Ross? You know, they're half the man.
Big time. Absolutely. Yeah. But again, as I say, I use that to justify it to myself. I've not done the maths, but I'm imagining the amount of calories you burn doing a Joe Wicks half hour is exactly the equivalent to the amount you consume when you eat a smallish double decker. So I'm neutralizing myself for the day. So I imagine I've not lost the 5 kilograms you claim to have, but I imagine when we're back up and running and back on the telly, Sean, I will look just as out of shape and podgy as I always did.
You never do, mate. You're always very sharp, I have to say. And I'll be back up to fighting weight because, as you know, in the truck in Premier Sports, there's a bag full of sweets and chocolates and crisps, and we all smash them before the games. And so, yeah, that's why I'm getting it in now while I can, I suppose.
Although you may have noticed there are a lot more left since Nugget left.
Yeah, secret eater, secret chocolate eater, yes.
Big time. Yeah. Sugar addict.
This is what everyone came for. It's good chocolate chat to balance up any talk of exercise, naughty talk like that. We'll get into some news from the week. We did also put something else out on the Twitter machine. Adam wanted to know, by the official Under the Sticks Twitter account, what one result from all of your time in rugby, whether you're a fan, player, coach, analyst, presenter, what's the one result you'd go back and change the score of? One leapt to mind for me. We will get to that later on in the show. Couple of things to whiz through. Just after we recorded last week, there was a big report came out on the salary cap in Premiership Rugby. Lots in there. Will they reduce the salary cap coming out of that? I don't know. We'll do it properly someday. Bristol, they want to host the return in Premiership Rugby behind closed doors at their own little venue. Sean, former Bristol coach, Ashton Gate, would it do the job for them?
Oh, it's a fabulous place. And they got big plans still, Andy. Even when I was there with Andy Robinson, the owners, Steve Lansdowne, he's one of the richest men in the country. His vision is for Bristol sport, not just Bristol rugby. So you've got Bristol City flying up. It won't be long before they're in the Premiership. They've got a women's rugby team, a women's football team that play in Europe. They've got a basketball team, badminton, you name it. He's got a motor racing team. So it's Bristol Sport is Steve's vision, and he's developing the facilities all around the Ashton Gate area. So yeah, I think they're pretty keen to get on with it. They've got players that are pretty expensive that they want to get going as well. So I would imagine they're pretty keen to get going, and they're in such a good position as well. I think Bristol have flown up in the last year or two with some of the signings they've had, so they want to get it on because I think they're smelling blood. I think they can get to where they were expecting to be a little bit quicker. So it's no surprise to me. Very ambitious.
Yeah, and they're also they're one club who is not in favour of reduction of salary cap. So watch this space. There's a lot going on there. That report, if you have a lot of time, and some of us do during lockdown, a lot of reading in there. New Ospreys owner, speaking of owners, James David Jandal. We touched on this last week. A big new investment into the Pro 14 and into Ospreys rugby. He had a piece with Rob Cole in the Times of London. It'd be interesting to see where this goes. He's talking about the Pro 14 and rugby in general having a bit of what he called a confusing TV portfolio. I think there's a few people that might say, yeah, there's a lot of channels we might have to get now to watch sport. We'll have a little look at that. So some other day. We've touched on it before, but we'll do it again. Maybe he's got big ambition here. Be interesting how it goes. We go to the Bundesliga outside Pro 14 territory. Football is back, but not as we know it. Did anyone see some of the clips from the Bundesliga?
Can I just tell you, I watched the Dortmund game.
Did you?
And then when I heard there was a tense finish in the offing, it was 4-0 to Dortmund. There was a tense finish in the offing with RB Leipzig and one of the other teams. Can't remember quite the name. But anyway, that went in. There was a last minute winner. So I enjoyed it. I was intrigued as well to see what it would look like, what it would sound like. And I thought when the commentators in the Dortmund game took about 35 minutes to get over the fact that there was no fans in the stands, which must have been a surprise to them when they saw the match start. Actually, it was really enjoyable. I thought, and Dortmund played really well, and I think, yes, sport is a different animal without the crowds in there, but it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. A good goal or a good try is still good.
Can I read you? Can I read you a bit from Gabriel Marcotti? It's very good, right? So he's saying the return looks different but feels great. Maybe you're old enough to have bought a pirated DVD of a first-run movie from a dubious street vendor. If you are, it's a little bit like that. Sure, you paid $5 to your laptop, except the sound is crappy, the subtitles filling half the screen, and you soon realize the guy who recorded is on his handy cam inside the theater, munching popcorn throughout. It's not quite the same, but it's all you have, right? You get on with it. Adam, you're completely right. Get over the fact there's no fans. We have sport back.
I got to be honest,
and
I think you if you're enthusiastic about the sport when there's a crowd there's no reason why you can't be enthusiastic when there's not. I mean, Ross and I have worked at games where it might be dire weather. Usually in Wales, it's been absolutely chiseling it down. It's windy. We're in a ridiculous position, or there might not be a lot to talk about. But I'd like to think, and Ross is one of the best in the business, we bring some energy and enthusiasm to it. It's the same if it's a dull game and you're commentating, you still bring a bit of oomph to it. So, particularly as it's been this long, if those guys haven't brought anything to the table, bring somebody else in.
Fancy it, Sean?
Yeah.
I will say, Steve McManaman did sound like he had spent most of lockdown doing his Bundesliga homework, so I will give kudos
on those
to
pronunciations. Can I just say something? Like I heard Paul Williams recently scandalously decrying books on this podcast. The heathen that he is, the absolute Philistine that he's proved himself to be. And I just want to correct or reset the balance on that, because in answer to your question, Andy, I didn't watch the Bundesliga. I've seen some of the clips on Twitter, but I found actually, far from I've craved rugby, but I've not craved sport in general. I wouldn't watch a league that I'd never otherwise show any interest in. So it didn't occur to me to tune in and watch a live game. But I've always got a groaning, creaking to read bookshelf in my house because I buy books like an idiot, and I can never read them all. But I found this lockdown period has been brilliant for trying to clear that bookshelf, which is no longer sagging. There's still loads of books on it that probably won't ever get read, but I'm just finding any downtime I've got once the kids have gone to bed, I've just been sticking the lamp on, pouring myself a little whiskey, and getting stuck into my library. So weirdly, I've probably watched less television than ever.
You know, you're bang on, and I was having this discussion the other night. I have not caught up with any of these box sets that everyone's talking about. I'm notorious in the background chat here. I've only seen half of one episode of the Michael Jordan documentary.
Sacrilege!
I've been reading
an exception for that.
I've been reading a lot. It's great.
I feel dreadful that I watched episode 9 on Tuesday and haven't been able to work in episode 10 yet.
It's better. There couldn't be a better finale. I think I'm with Ross. I haven't really missed the Bundesliga, if I'm honest. I don't miss the Premier League, and I watch county cricket. I'll watch golf if it's a major, although I love it. So I found myself the nostalgic games. You do, because it harps back to some memories. But some of these things, like the Drive to Survive Formula One, the Test, the cricket that we talked about.
That was brilliant.
And now this Jordan thing. I said to my boys today, I think it could possibly be the best thing I've ever watched. It's that good. It really is.
Yeah, it's all ahead of me.
Have you seen Scarlet Fever, the VHS of the Scarlets 92-93 treble winning season?
Now. Stop showing your true colours, yeah.
Because I'll get that on the post to you, because that's up there as a sports documentary. Rupert Moon narrating it.
Oh God, not chest pumping Ian Evans.
Big time.
Oh no, please.
That's a beautiful segue to Ben Franks joining Scarlets as scrum coach. Yeah, smooth, eh?
I got a quick story. The Osprey show today highlights of the 60 points to 17 thrashing at the Liberty Stadium. It was 7 minutes 23 seconds long. It was 7 minutes 23 seconds. I really enjoyed today. And Ross, I'll send that one to you in an email, a link, so you can watch that, because I'm sure you'll enjoy re-seeing that.
I'd be delighted to. I'm not sure what you're insinuating here, Sean, because being a broadcaster for as long as I have, I'm entirely objective and neutral.
Of course you are. Well, a quick story then, right? It was a game where I'm not sure there was this one, but it was a Boxing Day game where the original game was cancelled because the pipes froze in the Liberty Stadium. Okay.
Oh, I remember it well. Yeah.
20,000 people packed in, and literally 5 minutes before kickoff, no toilets, no confectionery, so on. So game's off. It's back on tomorrow. I'm thinking, well, okay, so 20,000 people had to go. I went to meet some mates of mine who were in Morgan's Hotel in Swansea. It just so happened, as I was having a beer, the referee for the evening, James Jones, was in there with a couple of his mates. So he came over, said hello. There was a Scarlets member of staff who shall remain nameless who had witnessed he and I having a conversation. That's all. Have a good night. See you tomorrow. Good luck. So on. So the following night now, we won by 60 points. There were a few yellow cards in the game. We probably had the majority of the scrum penalties. But a complaint went in because apparently I was colluding with the referee. Now, you've only got to watch those 7 minutes, 23 seconds back today to know that we were pretty much on top for most of the game. You know what I mean?
I just thought you relied on your flashy smile and your cheeky wink, and that was all.
No, I was just stuffing 60 points.
Yeah, congratulations.
Last two little points before we move on to some chat about stats and analysis that you might use in your broadcast, and we'll bring in Sam Lerner for that. Some discussion about competitions for whenever rugby gets back up and running. Now, don't forget, we have not. There's still a couple of competitions, including the Guinness Pro 14, that have not said we're not finishing the season. But when we get to next year, there's a European Cup to play, and there is now talk of a 24-team competition. We'll see how this all fits into a calendar, along with what the Six Nations say will not be a Four Nations in the autumn, contrary to speculation. Adam, I presume that's a topic of talk in the Pro 14 offices?
The Six Nations one, or
whichever you want to be interesting about.
Well, I suppose I think for the European Cup, I think it does make sense to give an opportunity to a few more teams, because like no matter what way you can find a way to finish off your seasons and get into next season, people will say, yeah, look, we know these were, a challenge and it was things that you couldn't have foreseen and you've dealt with it as best you can. But people will still feel, do you know what, if we'd played the full season, we reckon we would have qualified, etc. So I think opening the door to a few more teams in Europe, I think that's good. I think the Six Nations, I just don't, to me, like, some of the bigger headline stuff, in my line of work, you do hear that before it goes out. And the idea of doing the 14s, I really don't think that was, I mean, I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I didn't think there was any seriousness in that one. And I can't imagine why that would work. And I don't think, again, broadcasters who pay a lot of money to show these games, and the idea of France and Italy not being involved would take away massively from the competition. So glad to see that whatever plans are in place include 6 teams and 6 nations and a few extra teams in the Champions Cup. I think is a good thing.
Yeah, anything that gets money going into the game and keeps clubs and unions up, all in favour. Lads, let's get creative. Last one. Would you like to sign Malcolm Marx or Peter Steph du Toit? I would. and you can, because due to the South African rugby industry salary plan, they left. They've said they're off because the top players in the game down there, between a deal with the union and rugby and everyone else, they would have to take a pay cut of about 43%. So they said, right, lads, in 21-day window, you can go off, earn some coin elsewhere. So there's good few players have exercised this right. But man, Malcolm Marx, off to Japan maybe, Sean. Would you like to get out the checkbook if you were a club over here?
Yeah, I think both go well. Peter Steph du Toit, being named World Player of the Year is an obvious one. But Marx, for me, is a wrecking ball. I think the scrum in the World Cup came back to the fore with the Springboks, and even though there was other hookers, he can bring that. And I think a dynamic ball carrying, big scrummaging hooker is coming back. I think back to some of the sides I coached, and that was really important. So to have somebody of his ilk, then and again, du Toit, it's rare that you get somebody as fearsome, if you like, in a role that is quite a free role to play 6. You think back to all the great 6s, you can let them roam around, but he's a big man, a line out, big tackling, fit, good engine, nasty bit of work. I mean, it's everything you want. So, but the thing is, they're so expensive. England have these opportunities for a marquee signing, so you can maybe move a few people aside and have a marquee signing. In Wales, Ross will back me up here. None of our 4 will be able to touch either of those. I wouldn't have thought. Wouldn't be in the marketplace.
Geez, you'd almost need a club with a big load of foreign investment coming in, Ross, wouldn't you?
But and you mentioned the minor report earlier. Maybe the marquee players in England are going to be a thing of the past anyway. So it could be that the English clubs aren't able to tempt these guys over. But I suppose, as you say, given the circumstances that they've made themselves available, they may not command quite the huge pay packet they may otherwise have done, because it's unprecedented times and they're exploiting this loophole, as you say. But It remains to be seen whether the Ospreys' new owners will pump in some much-needed cash to the club. But they've already come out and said, haven't they, that they're not necessarily going to assemble a Galacticos-style squad that will rival the one that Sean looked after back in his days coaching the Ospreys. So it'll be interesting to see how and in what form that investment takes shape.
That was the Osprey side that didn't need a coach, that one. Just be very, very precise now.
I'm not going to bite on that one, right? I'm not going to just speak to the players, right?
Or meet the ref in Morgan's hotel the night before the game and
always worked. Always
buy
worked.
him a cigar.
But go back to what Ross is saying. He makes a very valid point. I think the Ospreys will have learned from their mistakes because, and this is a sports marketing, sports media company, so that I'm sure they'll be looking to broaden their horizons, promote the brand elsewhere, improve the marketing and communication systems, and try and generate a revenue from elsewhere that will enable them to fund the squad a bit better, rather than just going in and buying a marquee signing and throwing a lot of money at that, because that clearly isn't going to work at the Welsh regions at the moment.
Yeah, well, if they want to sponsor my backdrop, my door is open. That's all I'm saying, right? It will not cost a lot of money. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about stats and analytics in rugby, about what is useful when you're watching a game or reading about a game, and what's overkill for players and fans. We're going to bring Sam Larner in, analyst and journalist. Sam, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You're a good man to have in this conversation, because we've now got a very rounded thing here. We've got Adam from the competition point of view. We've got a presenter. We've got an analyst and commentator. We've got an idiot like me who just pokes fun at things. And when we got you, who actually put some of this stuff together for places like Rugby World, you did work for the Rugby World Cup last year. What speaks to you when I bring up a topic like this?
Well, I think the most important stat to look at, which is starting to come into the game a little bit more, but something I kind of twigged when I was in Japan for the Rugby World Cup, is that gain line success is the number one thing to look at really in rugby, because that's really what the game is about. It's about moving forwards with the possession that you have. If you get over the gain line, it makes everything easier. You get quicker ball. You're more likely to keep hold of the ball that you have. You're also more likely to be facing a defence that's kind of broken up because they're having to move backwards as well. So that is something that's coming in. It was available on the Rugby World Cup website during that time. I think it was also available on the Six Nations website as well. So I think that's the number one thing, but it's not kind of underutilized. You need to kind of go searching for it.
From the broadcasting perspective, Sean, I'll go to you here first. How do you work stats in to a broadcast? Like, what's the mechanics of that? Bring people into that.
Well, if the broadcasters can afford it and they present it, then when you're commentating or you're an analyst in the truck, for example, then you'll get a stats sheet. So they will employ some statisticians, some rugby statisticians, who will collate and log all the instances. It won't be as widespread as I would be used to as a coach when my rugby analysts are doing that. However, it will give you some individual feedback: number of tackles, number of carries, missed tackles, penalties conceded, that sort of thing, and general things like gain line, possession, territory, lineouts won and lost, scrum won and lost, penalties. So you can weave those in, and Ross is pretty good as a presenter because he keeps his eye on that sort of thing. He and I would communicate and come up with something that might be a little bit interesting. So if I've been banging on through the first half about the Dragons not getting across the gain line, those statistics can back that up, and I will compile some sort of footage then that Ross can lead me into, and we can have a good discussion at halftime about why that's happening. So it's like that really, it's a little bit basic, but like I always say, from my job is you've got to cater for the high-end, discerning, ex-professional player or coach that's watching, and Mrs. Miggins who's watching, who really, hasn't any real interest other than, she likes the show, she likes a bit of rugby, but she doesn't quite understand the game. Or he, Mr. Miggins, by the way. So you got to cater for that whole spectrum. When you're delving into the detail, when you're getting some hardcore stuff, then you're going to need a lot more like we get in professional rugby.
I got a note quietly earlier on from Russ Petty, a good stats man on Twitter. I don't think he'll mind me revealing that he sent it. He made a really good point here that said that there's a balance of layering information through a game. So everyone gets the insight that they'd like, just as you've referenced here. And he was wondering, like, would it be possible someday to have a feature where you could actually have a different stats appear in your broadcast, depending on if you are just, I want the bog standard, there's a game going on, just lead me through the game, or if you're someone who actually says, no, I really want to go in hard. Ross, this would not make your job easy if we had that.
It wouldn't, no. I think Mrs. Miggins probably knows a bit more than Sean's given her credit for, to be fair.
Yeah.
But we always do talk about that, don't we? You know, you don't want to dumb down too much to cater for the person who maybe doesn't play for a club or isn't a member of their local club, but equally you can't be overcomplicated and speak in purely coaching terms and then kind of ostracize those who maybe haven't got the same level of knowledge. But yeah, I think that our sort of aim in broadcasting is to strike that balance, and the notion of having sort of separate broadcast streams that would cater to different levels of the audience seems to me to be I mean, if it could be pulled off, fantastic. I just don't quite know how. What would you do? Like have a beginner, intermediate, and advanced level, and you can kind of tap in. I guess it's not beyond the wit of man, is it? That you could have some kind of interactive thing like that. But as Sean's mentioned, I think it's almost our responsibility to make sure that what we communicate isn't either, you know, so loaded with coaching jargon that the casual fan can't begin to unpick what Sean's saying, but equally that it isn't so basic and simple that someone who does play for their local first 15 thinks he's learned nothing from watching it, because he could get that from his coach down at his local rugby ground. So I think it is the responsibility of broadcasters to strike that balance. And I guess that's why it's so important to have forums like this and things like social media, which allows that kind of feedback. But we didn't have when we first started doing this job. You know, we would sort of do our broadcast, we'd debrief ourselves, you know, as a production team, but we wouldn't necessarily know whether the audience had got as much out of it as perhaps we'd hoped. So it is an ever evolving thing, I think.
Sam, when you're looking at the stats that kind of jump out at you, saying we see these on broadcasts, do they mean a lot? And I'd bring in print, whether you read it online or in newsprint as well. There's some things that we see scattered through articles that maybe, like, what are they trying to tell us? That's really what I'm getting here.
Yeah, I think there's a few that are used quite frequently that aren't that helpful. So, for example, lying out success is one that we see pretty much in every broadcasting and in a lot of newspapers and things like that. So a line out success of 100%, you're thinking fantastic. That's great news. But of that 100%, how many of them have been slapped down to a scrum half who's immediately knocked it on? How many have been won at the front of the line out with no competition? How many have been caught by the scrum half, but then he's being tackled immediately? So what would be more interesting is how many of those line outs generated either quick ball, or in the case of a ball, kind of actual useful possession. So this is stuff that you can get, like Sean mentioned. It's more at a higher level, stuff that coaches might have access to during games, but it gives us a little bit more insight into what's going on, on the pitch. So 67% line-out possession or 80% line-out possession, it doesn't quite tell us the whole picture. And scrum possession is the same. Scrum success is the same thing. It's 100% scrum success might sound great, but if all those times you're running backwards and the number 8 is kind of clawing out from the second of those feet, that's not as useful, or that's more interesting. That's more context to know.
What I'd like to see, and is the reason somebody like me is on there. I must be seen as some sort of expert, all right, to impart my experience. And if I was in a head coach position, I'd have my analyst coding and tapping away certain aspects of the game, so that at any point in the game, I can ask them, what's that? Or what is this? What is he doing? What's he done there? What have they done there? And if we can get to a point in broadcasting where all of those sort of things are covered, all the bases are covered by Sam's team, all the analysts, right? And then if I'm some sort of expert there, I'm in the flow of the game and I'm understanding and seeing patterns of what might be unfolding, I can go to them and say, give me the stat for this, you know? And it might be, what's the percentage of quick ball from lineouts in the opposition's half? Now, the way it is at the moment, I wouldn't be able to have access to that as the pundit, as the commentator. But if I could go to, because they're all recorded by both teams or a separate entity anyway, Opta, you know. So if I could just, you know, touch a button and say, give me that stat, please, and up it comes. I'd be able to embellish our production, you know, and point people to certain areas that are as they're unfolding, as you would as a coach, you know, as an expert in the professional game. So whether we can get to that, that might be really nice.
Yeah, the problem with a lot of that is that it takes so much time to code rugby. It's different than football, and there's 2 passes made in football matches as well. But rugby takes a lot of time to get right because it's messy. It's really messy. But one of the things you're getting at is the so what bit. Sam, you touched on this. Well, yes, this is a number, but how is that meaningful? So a missed tackle on its own is not meaningful. A missed tackle in the context of a chain of missed tackles where there's been 2 in a row, that to me says that leads to a line break. You've got a problem. But to do that quickly at speed, it takes money and investment, and you know, there's only so much budget to go around in rugby.
Yeah, this is one of the problems. I actually, maybe I'm going to contradict myself slightly here, but I know you put this out on Twitter earlier, and there's lots of people saying, you know, these stats are rubbish and this stat is meaningless and all this kind of stuff. In essence, no stat is meaningless. They tell you something about what's happening in the game. What we all want is huge amount of context, and just, you know, we want to know what happened with that line break. What did it lead to? But that there has to be that balance, as Sean and as Ross said earlier. You know, there has to be a balance between giving people tons of contextual stats, which I would love. You know, I would love that kind of broadcast, but it's not going to be interesting to anyone really more than me. So we need to kind of use what we have already, which is useful. You know, missed tackles is a useful stat because the team that misses the most tackles tends to lose. Not all the time, but 50%, but, you know, more than 50% of the time, the team that misses the fewest tackles wins. The team that makes the most carries over the gain line wins. So those things are useful. They're interesting to know. They don't tell the whole picture, but they are interesting for the viewer to know, and they do tell us something about what's going on in the game.
Adam, come in here.
Yeah, I think the idea around, you know, different levels of stats information depending on, you know, how savvy a viewer you are. Actually, you know, it's not a bad concept, and one of the things that we're not just talking about internally but trying to develop is how do we, you know, get this, and how do we make this, you have to have this in your hand, not just to check tweets during a game, but actually we'll give you the best insights possible that maybe augment what the broadcasters do, because you can do it in a slightly different way. And then if you've got rights holder, you know, if you've got the league working in conjunction with the broadcasters, you know, you can get the best information, you know, possible that can go to the broadcast audience out that way, and you can work with them. And there's a couple of different things we hope to do in the future with our broadcast partners. But then through the phone and through apps, you can really go for really high detail stuff. So you're not trying to compete with what the broadcast is telling you. You're really just trying to tell people this is what's important that's happening in the game. And especially something that maybe would work when you're in the stadium yourself. So, you know, it's if you're in the stadium, you're probably getting the least access to what's happening compared to sitting at home and watching on the sofa. And even you can look at things about holding, you know, if you can hold your phone up, see augmented reality and the stats pop up on your phone in terms of, you know, on the pitch, there's lots of fun things you can do with it. But like, we've seen some presentations from companies, and it, you know, really clever stuff that can just completely change how you view rugby. And rugby's challenge, I think, is to take a casual fan and hook them pretty much, not through the game being complicated, but by simplifying it. And even something as simple as putting an overlay on the pitch. So, you know, kicker lines up to take, a shot at goal. Well, you go to the wide camera and then your overlay flattens onto the pitch and actually it shows you all the different areas. It's not that he kicks 22 out of 30 coming into the game. Actually, he kicks 90% from that spot and he misses 45% from the other spot. All those kind of things that you can do in a flash. And that's something we're really interested in doing, is improving the viewer's experience. But actually the second screen, whether you're at home or whether you're in the ground, how can we find that little niche to give you really key information that will just complement everything else that's going on?
And the Wi-Fi in every stadium is going to be perfect.
5G is coming, Andy. That's a different podcast.
It's interesting when we talk about the differences between broadcast, which is very much there is one feed, and you have to speak to everybody, and the fragmented or fragmented is probably the poor term, but we now can access so much online that we have the mainstream articles in, let's say, the Times of London or the Irish Times or whatever paper is your choice, that will be speaking to a large audience, but also websites, analyst columns that are run perhaps online only, that can go into that length and level of detail that we did not have this 10 years ago. I mean, guys like Murray Kinsella, that's where they have made their mark. And there's a lot here in the game now that we can really get into, Sam. There's voices that can be heard.
Yeah, well, I think that's a crucial bit, is that there are people out there who are experts in not only understanding what the stats are saying, but they're able to put that across in a way that, maybe it doesn't quite cover the same spectrum that broadcasters are looking for, but it does cover quite a wide spectrum. And one of the things that I think might be a great example here is during the Six Nations, there was the 22 entries stat, which is an absolutely fascinating stat. Kind of, you go into the 22, how many times do you come out of there with any kind of points? And that's crucial for coaches to see, because obviously you want that number as high as possible. And that kind of is the constant battle to how to get that number as high as possible. And the way that this was presented in the Six Nations was it took the numbers and it put them left, right, and middle. So how many times do a team enter on the left, how many times on the right, and how many times in the middle, which really is not particularly useful for anyone to understand. So that is a stat that has been created by the kind of the slightly more nerdy side of the rugby watching world, and is now being used in a broadcast capacity, but it arguably has been used incorrectly and is used in a way that doesn't work for me, because it doesn't really tell me anything, but also doesn't work for the occasional watcher who's sat in the pub, because it's a kind of a meaningless stat. It doesn't really tell them anything either.
Yeah, Sean, it came in from the sevens world a lot. It's very simple in concept, as Sam said, but it can really tell someone, my objective is to get into your red zone. Once I get there, do I do damage?
Yeah, look, that would have been a statistic that whoever it was will have picked up from professional coaches. Well, I was doing that back with the Ospreys in the late noughties, so that's not a surprise to me. And this is the danger, not to discredit anyone, that I would always get my rugby analysts coming to me with suggestions for certain statistics, things they wanted to code, things they wanted to see. But I think it has to come from in a rugby environment, from the coach. So I want you to code this, I want you to give me these stats and that stats. They may give me a bunch of others, but it's up to the coach to interpret what he or she wants. So, and I think that, like I said earlier, that needs to come through in a production for broadcasters as well, So, Ross and I are on the same page. So we understand what an effective tackle is. We understand what a line break is. We understand what an entry into the 22 is, because when he and I are having that dialogue, we're a team there at half-time and full-time, and then he interviews the head coach. So, I mean, I think it has to come from that personally. We're in danger of, like Sam's example in the Six Nations, of losing people. And, sometimes it's stats for stats' sake.
It's context, isn't it? It's vital. I mean, Sam's mentioned that we've got access to more stats than we've ever had before. but it's a case of drilling down and figuring out exactly what's relevant, not just to us, but to the broadcasters as well. I remember a few years back, before Six Nations, we used to go down to these BBC away days in London, and we had Ryan Chambers, Ryan, Sean, who works with the Welsh national team as one of their analysts, and he gave us a talk on exactly what they were looking for and the kind of information they fed back to the coaches during the game, and the kind of stuff I guess we're talking about the audience might be interested in. And there was a couple of incidents we all discussed that day, and one of them, I can't remember the exact year, but Ross Moriarty against England, Wales against England, and he was having the game of his life. Wales were losing the game, but he was chucking himself about, smashing into tackles, knocking people over. But he'd come back from a long-term injury, and he was taken off on 60 minutes. And the suspicion from everyone watching was that was a preordained move. He was going to play 60 because he didn't have 80 in his legs. But the evidence in front of everyone was that he was tapping into some kind of reserves, some adrenaline coursing through his veins. And actually, it seemed like a really bad decision to take him off. And I remember we discussed this with Ryan, and I think it was a lot more nuanced and complicated than that, But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is stats can be incredibly useful and incredibly insightful in terms of identifying trends, or for us for contextualizing themes when we're covering games. But often, as Sean said, it's an instinct. If you're a coach steeped in the values and traditions of rugby, you can see things unfolding on the pitch in front of you, which aren't necessarily going to be reflected in statistics. And I suppose it feeds back into our debate about what is relevant in broadcasting to an audience. Sometimes things unfold in front of you. Players go to levels that they're not meant to. The GPS will be saying the opposite. And I think it's important to keep that element in there, that we don't become automatons and we're not governed by stats. Yes, we use them for the useful purpose they serve, but ultimately rugby is about, the human being performing under duress, and it will always be that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've been involved in productions where, on the 60-minute mark, there's certain stats that get flashed up, but it's not for any other reason than there's 60 minutes in and it's in the running order. So that shows a lack of empathy and feel for the game. Is what I'm saying. What Ross talks about, to plug another podcast, but it's a rugby one. Eddie Jones has just released some coaching podcasts. I just listened to his first two, and he talks about this, and he talks about GPS, he talks about stats and feedback, and he categorically talks about, do you know what, when it comes down to it, and it's a 50-50, you go with your gut. You go, and as you get more experienced, you rely on that. And like the Ross Moriarty one, they can have all the GPS and all the stats for wherever you like, but don't tell me he needed to come off there. There's, he's in the game of his life. He's in the throes of it. And okay, we take him off after 50 because we need him for the next. It's about the moment, and it's about what will win you that game at that time. And my gut feeling was, don't take him off.
There's a piece that ties in two things
Eddie
you've said
Jones
there,
did.
You go, Ross.
I was just going to say, Eddie Jones famously used to take Willie Hines off after 57 minutes.
Yeah.
50, and that is a fact. Go back and look at the tape.
It was his gut feeling. 57 reasons.
I was going to say, Ross, with the point you made about an experienced coach.
What level of the broadcast would that gag be on?
We're going to move on. I'm going to bring in a comment from Brian Hadley here, came through on Facebook. Need to compare stats, not with the two teams playing, as in on that day, but also the average within the league they're in and with each other. And also historically, I think that's really important. So when we see player X has made X tackles on the day, right? Is that actually impressive or not? Otherwise, it's just a record of something that happened that day. But if I am also told that that's actually the most, and I'll go back to Russ Petty. Russ was a mine on DM earlier on. Thank you, Russ. He said, if Mako Bunapola made 27 tackles against Ireland, but that was also the third most that any front row has made in the last 10 years, for example, right? that is meaningful to anyone. That says that something actually really interesting happened today. And maybe it was someone running at Mako all day long, but I don't think it was. That suddenly is a little more interesting. It provides that context that I think we were talking about.
Could I get a shameless plug in here for Brian's saying, you need to compare the teams, but it's the averages and stuff like that. Well, I'm gonna try and, through the magic of technology, try and share something here with everyone. If I can. Good. And
Always be careful when you're sharing your own screen there, Adam.
actually,
Make sure anything incriminating is minimized.
This is not as easy as I would have thought. But if you go to the stats section on our new website, pro14.rugby, that's how we've approached it. It's not saying, right, here's the team with the most offloads, here's blah blah blah. It's actually saying, right, we've got all the attacking stats, the defensive stats and stuff like that. We've weighted different things. And then you can go and see, well, who is the best attacking team in the tournament? And then you can see the 6 or 8 different stats that feed into that. But you can also, within that, see where they rank in those stat categories. We've done something similar for players. But it just means that when you want to preview a game, then you can actually go click into the fixture, and it will show you all those averages and how they tee up. Because the thing that we would look at, the stats that we'd get sent through, and you'd say to yourself, what does like 6,700 meters even mean? You know what I mean? Like, it's, okay, give me an idea of what an average is, and is this team better than that? And you can quickly compare strengths. But when you start using the whole numbers, I think you can seriously lose people there.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's
with
where
that.
someone like Sean, as he says, he provides the context as a professional rugby coach. We get the stats in. Say, for example, one we always quote is meters made. Which are the players who are making the most meters with the ball in hand. But invariably, the person at the top of that chart every week is a fullback.
Yeah.
Because fullbacks receive the ball in space when the opposition kicks it, and they'll run back 30 meters unopposed before they meet the first defender. So sometimes stats like that, you'll read it, won't you, Sean, and think, wow, Barry Davis is amazing. He makes 500 meters every couple of games, but it's because of the position he plays in, and the opposition side kick the ball away a lot. Therefore, the fullback just eats up those yards. So that's why having Sean there, you might make that point, but Sean would put that into context.
Yeah, we covered something very similar a couple of weeks ago where I waxed lyrical about the Rhys Ruddock 1 yard carry where he manages to get hit by 3 men, thus creating space for everybody else. It's a thing of beauty. Right, we're going to we have another chat to get to. So Sam Larner, I have to let you go, but thank you very much for joining us today.
That's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, guys.
No, really enjoyed that.
Cheers, Sam.
Hey, Sam.
Because Sean, you were busy with Andy Friend.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying these chats for Guinness Pro 14, coach on coach or ex-coach now. And I think, again, look, Ross is an expert presenter, interviewer, but I think with having been in that seat, there's something about chatting to somebody who's been in that seat, you know what I mean? Who a coach to coach, you sort of loosen them up a little bit. They almost feel that they're in familiar territory. They can trust this guy. And I have to say, the ones we've done, they've been brilliant. Andy Friend, what a really great guy. To give up his time, but to be so honest, and he's had a real long, attractive career. He's coached all around the world, and spoke very highly of the Guinness Pro 14 and particularly of Connacht and the great things that they do. And so it was a nice chat. He spoke about Eddie Jones. He spoke about Connacht in the community, which is really interesting to hear, and just his philosophy on developing Connacht players and coaches, and almost giving them their head, and how he's learned from in the past that empowering people and letting them make decisions has, the longer you are in the tooth, then you have the benefit of seeing from the top of the hill, don't you? When you're on your way up, you tend to have a few trees in the way. So it was really nice. It was worth a watch.
That's a really nice way of saying that he's old, isn't it? I think we're almost getting to the end of things. Adam, do you have anything you want to throw in before the end?
I'm going to roll in a clip of Andy talking about speaking about
Oh,
his
we have one.
relation,
Brilliant.
with Eddie Jones. And it's when I chat to Sean about it, we talk about the various points around the guys and what might be interesting. And you kind of say, look, 15, 20 minutes, see how it's going. We don't want to, we don't want to flog a dead horse. This just kept going, and it goes for close to 30 minutes, and it's split across 2 points or 2 parts. Go watch it on YouTube. Really, if you have a bit of time, if you don't want to read books like Paul Williams, then sit down, because Andy Friend had actually worked with the Brumbies as an assistant to Eddie Jones, and then worked for the Wallabies 2002, 2003, was part of that setup that lost the World Cup final stuff. So he's seen Eddie Jones up close and personal, and he's all the better for it. I'll put the clip in there.
In order to get on well with Eddie, at some stage you got to stand for something. And we probably had our moment probably 18 months, maybe 12 to 18 months into our relationship. And now knowing Eddie 20 years ago, or for 20 years I've known him, but at the time I wasn't sure what the hell was going on, but he was basically challenging my thoughts on something. And I now know it was probably a test, just saying, well, is this bloke prepared to back himself, or is he going to be someone who I can ride over the top of? And I stood my ground. It was quite a confrontational. You can imagine two Aussies having a go at each other. We tend to be quite vocal individuals, Australians, and not many P's and Q's minded. But it was reasonably vocal, and I walked out. The next day he was fine, and ever since then we've never had another issue. So I think Eddie's got a great way of testing people. He wants to know whether you actually stand by your thoughts and your comments. But ever since that moment, and in fact leading up to that moment, he's been a brilliant mentor for me, and a great friend, and someone I've learned a lot off. So I owe him a lot.
I look forward to watching that. It's going to be good. We're going to wrap things up, but first I want to dip into some of the comments that came during the show, because everyone's been really nice. It's like everyone's saying, hello, good evening. So hello, Scott Howells in Wales. Hello, Elizabeth Hackett in Galway. Keith Green, hello. Alexander Cameron. Deep fried Mars bar, or was that frozen Mars bar?
Frozen, yeah.
Frozen, yeah. I've done that. It is good. Hello from Bloemfontein, home of the Cheetahs. That's Dennis Ashwell. Is Sean nodding off? No. That's the way he looks when he's really interested, right? Thomas Lester, hello from Dublin, and it's goodbye from us. Thank you, Sam Larner, for dropping in. Thank you, Ross Harries, special guest appearance. Great to have you.
Andy?
Yes?
Are we using a topic that we were going to discuss?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that topic. Yeah, but it really hurts. Name the game that you watched.
You get the from this show for forgetting.
It's all right. Name the game that you watched or were involved in that you lost but wished you could change the score. Adam, you really want to get in there, so go for it.
No. I'll go last. I'll let Sean go first, because I knew exactly which game he was going to pick.
I don't want to harp on about this one, so I'm going to change my mind. Obviously, Adam's referring to the 2010 Heineken Cup quarter-final, Biarritz down in San Sebastian. If I had my time again, I'd throttle George Clancy, but that's another thing. I'm actually going to go for the 2011 Rugby World Cup semi-final. That's mine. Sam Orban sent off, but I would change the score because I would really be interested to see how Wales would have got on in that final. I have a feeling that we might have been, the one chance in my time that we would have had to win the World Cup. So that's mine, that one, the Sam Orban sending off game. It was rescinded. He played in the final. We won the game in spite of the red card, and then we beat the All Blacks to win the 2011 Rugby World Cup. There you go.
Ross, do you have one?
Why can I've gone first? Because look, if you're Welsh, there's never going to be a different answer to that question.
Yeah.
I thought about it. 88. I remember watching Wales win a Triple Crown, and we had France in the last game, and weirdly, it was in. Let me get this right. Was it in Cardiff or? Yeah, it was in Cardiff. And normally, you didn't want to go to France in the springtime. Paris in the springtime at the end of a campaign when the weather was good and the pitches were dry and France were amazing. But it was a horrible, wet, windy, awful day. And it was a rubbish game. Wales lost 10-9. So, but for a single point, it could have been a Grand Slam year, which would have been the first one.
Lescabora, was it?
But yeah, it was. Yeah. But it pales into insignificance compared to that 2011 semi-final. And I am firmly of the belief that Wales would have won the final. And I don't think that's delusional. I just think New Zealand, they won by a point against a French side that had lost to Tonga in the pool stages and had also been smashed by the All Blacks in the pool stages. And their coach, as we know, had lost the dressing room and his players weren't paying any attention to him. So if France could have got within a point of them, the way Wales were playing and the momentum Wales would have had off the back of a semi-final victory, I genuinely believe that was Wales's. I'm not going to say one and only chance because, they got to the semis this time around and who knows what the future holds. But it felt for years like just such unjust missed opportunity.
If you are watching to this now or listening to it later on and you have never watched the 2011 World Cup final in full and you've only seen the result, go back and watch it. It is remarkable. The refereeing performance is fascinating. That's where I stopped talking, right?
Sean, I'll ask you this one as well, because I remember speaking to Adam Jones, who claimed that the Tony Woodcock try in that final was a Lynn Jones invented move. Is that right?
It was. Yeah, it was. It
True
was.
Story.
True story. I was talking to Justin Marshall last night about this, actually, because he was commentating. I was watching Super Rugby, and he commentated, and the Sunwolves did a move, an Ospreys move, the old one in the middle of the line out.
Mm-hmm.
And he commented and he said, that's an old Ospreys move. And Grant Nesbitt said to him, what was the move called? He said, I can't remember. And I texted him, and then live commentary, he said, I've got it. It's called this. I've just had a text from Sean Holley, my old coach. He'd be loving this. But yeah, Lynn was very inventive in those line-out areas, and that was something that they tweaked it a little bit, but it was a little subtle block of movement here, and won in the World Cup. But
so not only were Wales denied a place in the final, but the winning try was imagined up by a Welshman. What does that? What does that even mean? Does that mean we can claim some of the credit for it?
No,
I don't know.
You can try. For me, it's 2013 Lansdowne Road or Aviva Stadium on Lansdowne Road turf, and the All Blacks win that was taken away. We'll never get it back because Chicago just wasn't the same. We'll never ever get that back. I will.
Was this the penalty, the conversion rather, that was retaken?
Yeah, I mean, a draw would have been one thing, but it was, what was it, 19-0? My God.
That is, I would say, one of the more incredible atmospheres that I've experienced, well, certainly in the first half, because it was just disbelief that we were 9-0 up. There
was people literally looking around and going, what? This is this is on. Great. It was real disbelief.
Yeah, we can't all be hallucinating.
But similarly, and Sean will remember this, 17-0 up in Nelspruit against South Africa. Jamie Roberts scored, I think, and then of course Liam Williams gets red carded in the final moment. Cornel Hendricks going into the corner, and it's a penalty try rather than a try, which would have left the conversion right out on the touchline, and they win in the 80th minute, and that was in South Africa. So that was another one that, while probably not as significant because it was a tour game in effect, but I couldn't believe my eyes when that lead just evaporated. Well, I couldn't believe them when the lead was built, but then to see it evaporate and then the result be denied him in such cruel fashion We've got a lot
Yeah.
of these, haven't we? The Celtic nations.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
I'll start off the one that like just felt like such a gut punch, and we've talked it to death in the last few pods, was that second test for the Lions in 2009. I mean, there's your almost full Celtic horror show for you if you want. The ones that stick out, and I know what my number one is. There's a lot of All Blacks ones where we were close to beating them down there and things like that, and in the last 10 they blew us away. And then the other one that sticks out, actually, for similar reasons to both of you, with Wales in the 2011 World Cup. You know, if Ireland had beaten Wales in that quarter final, you know, you would have looked at that and you would have thought the possibilities apparently are there, you know, hindsight, etc. That was torturous, because you knew you could watch it and you knew it was the last chance for so many of these guys. And you could actually see about 5-10 minutes in the second half, they are not going to figure this out. It's not going to, and it was like pulling the toenails off. That second half. It's horrible. But I tell you,
it's a great game.
The one I will never, ever forget is Vincent Clerc absolutely shattering hearts in Croke Park in 2007. You know, there was so much build up to the first ever rugby game to be played at Croke Park. The responsibility on the team, on the crowd, on everything, the whole history and the significance of it. And that cannot be downplayed in any way. And I know some people, you know, try to do that at times. We were there, like, you know, 2 minutes to go, I think, and it looked like Ireland were going to win. And, you know, in hindsight, you know, 40 points put on England, they could have done a grand slam, and Vincent Clerc ends up spying John Hayes, you know, 5 yards away from the Irish try line, and it's just game over. And it's just sickening. It was sickening because everything, this unimaginable, like us beating France at that stage, like we went through a run of 4 or 5 years where we had France's number, but up until then they were the ones, and Clerc in particular was the one who would just dash Irish hopes all the time. And you were there, you were right on the knife edge of this is going to be absolutely incredible and historic, and then he just turns up and does what he does.
So Vincent Clerc is the link here then. He is the man that turns up and crushes the dreams of the Celtic nations.
I must check his record in Scotland.
Yeah,
don't ever
it's
get
all
on
right.
the pod.
You're right. We hammered England at the same time. I'll take it. Still pales compared to 2013. That was absolute soul crushing. Do you know, the best part of that day was I used to live with a bunch of Kiwis. We all went out together afterwards. It was absolutely magnificent party that night. Jerry Clancy, I rewatched that New Zealand whenever things are going too well in my life. It keeps me in check. Yes, Jerry. Yes. Adam, can I wrap the show now, or have I forgotten anything else?
I think you're all good now, yeah.
I'm good. Thank you for keeping me in check. Thank you, Sam Larner. Thank you, Ross Harries. Thank you, Sean Holley. Thank you, Adam Redmond.
Pleasure.
Thank you to all of you who've given us some of your time this evening or listening back. This was Under the Sticks, presented by Big Red Cloud. My name's Andy McGeady. Thank you for listening or watching, and we'll talk to you soon.
He called me cheetah. Alla mamma cheetah. Alla se Nicola sa cheetah.